Welcome! Sorry, I started thank you. Did you have your lunch? Yeah. Were you starving? Yeah. Yes. The other group was snacking in here because I think it was hard to make it to lunch. So we are so happy to have Marla Thompson here today as your keynote. She has a great presentation and some great advice to share with all of you. She is a senior vice president at Salesforce. Salesforce is a very large company here in Indiana. Actually, it's a large company worldwide. So, but is it headquartered in Indiana?
San Francisco. So we have 75,000 employees in over 39 countries. So we added 22,000 employees in the last year alone. Pretty big
Company. Yeah. Marla's super passionate about developing women, developing leadership with women, mentoring, and so that is what she's here to talk about today. She received a Bachelor of Science degree from Purdue University in engineering, and she went to Harvard Business School and got her MBA there at Harvard. She is a member of our Sycamore board, which is the school that you're at here, and she has some great kids that go to school here. And welcome, Marla Thompson.
Thank you so much, Katie. Thank you. I love the energy, and I love being with all of you. Can I wrap you guys up and take you with me every time that I go to a presentation? Yeah? You guys okay with that? Perfect. Okay, I'll go for it. All right, before I introduce myself professionally, I always introduce myself personally first, because I always first identify, who am I, right? Jobs will come and go, but who am I? I am a wife. So Fred Thompson is my dear husband. We have been married for 14 years this week, so we just celebrated our 14th anniversary, and we have 3 kids. So Dyer is on the far right. He is in 4th grade here at Sycamore, and then I have twins, Ian and Gwen, who are in 2nd grade at Sycamore. So when Gwen heard that I was coming to a conference with middle school girls, what do you think she said? Can I come? Mommy, can I go? With all girls. She likes being with older girls. She's like, can't I go? Can't I go? I'm like, soon, honey, soon you will go. So know that she really wanted to be here. So I'll introduce myself from a family standpoint. Then personally, what else do I love to do? So that's me on my horse, the 4 kids. So I love riding horses. So I grew up riding horses in high school and still continue to do that to this day. I love to scuba dive. I love being under the sea. You see such different experiences under the sea. The geek in me also likes understanding oxygen levels, nitrogen levels, like depth, and some of the mechanics just of the actual scuba diving. I also love to travel the world. So before kids were born, I've been to over 35 countries, and that was just for fun. Again, what mattered for me from that is the perspective. You learn such a different perspective. I was in China, and we went to China to a university, and we were the host for one of the universities there. And it was interesting. It's like they took us to a picnic, and so they started making chicken on a grill. Now, do they normally make chicken on a grill? No. And so it was raw chicken touching each other and other things, but it was so interesting just watching the customs, because they were trying to do something that would make us feel at home. And it was just an interesting perspective of some of the questions that they were asking and just hearing about their world. Professionally, so I work at Salesforce. So I've been at Salesforce for 3 years. Before that, I worked for Procter & Gamble and Campbell Soup. Procter & Gamble, does anybody know Crest toothpaste? Hands up. Okay, Charmin toilet paper, Tide laundry detergent, Scotty. Those are some of the products that Procter & Gamble makes. Campbell Soup, Godiva chocolate. Anybody know Godiva? Pepperidge Farm cookies. Campbell Soup, Campbell's condensed soup. So those are some of the products that Campbell's makes. So, now, when they asked if I'd be the keynote, they asked if I'd come share a little bit of information about how I got to where I am. Here's what I'll tell you. If you would have asked me 5 years ago if I would be working at Salesforce today, I would have said no. I would have had no clue. If you would have asked me when I was in your seat where I would have gone to college, I would have had no idea. So what I want to be sure that you know, I have had a murky crystal ball, but it always starts getting a little clearer when I just keep taking the next step, right? So I can't see all the way in the future, but I can see what the next step is. And I just kept taking the next step. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to share 3 themes for you of things that have helped me get to where I am. First one, what's it say? Build a strong foundation. Well, that's what I did with engineering. I went to Purdue. Purdue was one of the toughest things that I have ever experienced. And I'll tell you why. There are a lot of classes there that will push me, and that pushed me pretty hard. When I left high school, I had a 4.6 GPA out of a 4 in high school. You can, because you actually have advanced classes. AP classes will allow you to do that. And by the way, I was actually ranked 10th in my class with a 4.6. So I went to Purdue, and it was interesting. I had 2 years of physics in high school. They covered those 2 years of physics in 1 semester at Purdue. So it went pretty fast. Here's what I learned going through that program. I learned grit. What's grit? Ellen? Perseverance. Yes, it is. It is perseverance. Anybody else have another idea for grit? Coming right back to that one. Grit. What other things would come to mind? Go ahead.
Determination.
Determination. Passion. Yes, exactly. All 3 of those came into play. And I will tell you, here's what I learned when I was building that solid foundation. I realized that I was stronger than I ever been because I pushed through it. And I had to learn how to fail. I had to learn that if I can give myself that foundation, that will set me up for my life. My father told me something that was very interesting when I was going to college, and it stuck with me. He said, you can choose one of 2 paths. You can choose to pay for 4 years and do the hard work, and then that will allow you to play for 40, or you can choose to play for 4 years, and then by making those choices, then you will be paying for 40 years. I'm pretty good with math. Which one do you think I chose? Yeah, I chose to pay for 4 years. And by the way, and that paid off. I was so happy that I ended up taking my father's advice and buckling down and doing that. It was interesting, because of my engineering degree at Purdue, that completely set a trajectory for me that I never would have been able to imagine. I have never been an engineer for a day in my life. And I have my engineering degree. Still to this day, I will go in meetings and I will work with engineers, and they'll say, I remember this about 15 years ago in one company, this engineer said, he's like, no, Marla, you're not going to understand this. And I said, let me see the spreadsheets, like bring out the flow charts, let me see how all this stuff connects. And there was something, we were integrating 2 companies, and there was something that I pointed out, I'm like, what's this? And his face went white. And I'm like, you still haven't answered my question, what is this? And he's like, that's a mistake. But it was interesting, it was just because engineering gave me the foundation to know how to think strategically through problems, that's how I ended up continuing to learn that skill. It's a muscle. What do you see on this picture? Take risks. Has anybody ever been on monkey bars? Hands up. Okay, what happens when you're on the monkey bars? You fall. Excellent. You fall. What else do you do? Go ahead. You trust in your strength to keep climbing. Excellent. I'm going to come back to that in 1 second. Right behind you. You what?
You could succeed.
You could succeed, exactly. To move forward, what do you have to do? How many hands are on the bars at one time? 1. Because you can't hold on to the back and move forward, can you? You have to be afraid, or you have to be able to risk letting go. You can't be afraid. You can't be afraid to let go so that you continue moving forward. Now the interesting thing, I'm going to go back to the muscles. The more you do the monkey bars, what happens? The better you get. It becomes easier. What do you build? Muscles. You build muscles. Most of the risks in life are actually just strengthening and using muscles. Some of the best public speakers that I've seen, and I remember when I was in high school, I saw a public speaker and I said to somebody, I was like, they are natural, they are born to do that. And do you know what they told me? They said they've practiced. This isn't their first time that they're speaking. And it was interesting. They're like, it's a muscle. They've done it over and over. They've learned what things have worked. They've learned what things haven't worked. So always take risks. I don't care if you're trying different sports. I don't care if you're trying improv. I don't care if you're trying different classes. But always take risks. Push yourself to be uncomfortable. You will learn more throughout your entire life by figuring out what it is that you don't want to do, that will help you figure out what it is that you do want to do. Last thing. What's that say? My mentors. What are they doing? What are those two hands doing? One is reaching out. Yep. One's reaching up. The other's reaching. Yep. Is reaching back. Back. So you're right. It does look down, but it's like. But I always think of it as back. I have had so many mentors who have, when I have reached up, they have grabbed my hand and helped pull me up. But never be afraid to reach up. A mentor who I had was in high school. He was my physics teacher, so remember when I mentioned that physics 2 class? I walked into that class, it was my senior year in high school, and there were 13, 12 people in the class. How many were females? Well, me. I was the only female. So the next day I walked back into that class and I said, Mr. Emmert, I said, yeah. And he listened very clearly to my word choice. I said, Mr. Emmert, I don't belong here. And do you know what he did? He took me aside and he said, why do you think that you don't belong versus other people not belonging? He said, you absolutely belong to be here. And it was interesting. I aced physics 2. He was right. But if he would have let me think that because I was different and because I was the only female in that class that I didn't belong, if he would have let me do that, that would have changed my entire career trajectory. So also, when you have a mentor, listen to them. When I was getting ready to go to college, my father went to Purdue, so when he told me that I should go to Purdue for engineering, do you know what I thought? He doesn't know anything. I was like, he doesn't know anything. He went to Purdue. I'm from Indiana. I'm from Noblesville. It's a town that's near here. But so I got into Cornell, and I went to Cornell and I talked to the admissions officer. And do you know what she said to me? She said, I've got one question. I said, what? And she said, so you got into Purdue? Yes. At Purdue Engineering? Yes. And she said, why are you going here? And I said, because my dad told me I should go to Purdue. And she's like, you might want to listen to him. But it was interesting, but it took her telling me that for me to end up making a path that ended up, again, changing my whole trajectory. So listen to mentors, ask them questions, and find people who you want to emulate, and then listen to some of the advice that they share. I want to open it up now to Q&A, and then I'll bring us back. Does anybody have any questions? Hey, back.
Was there ever a time you failed?
Oh, was there ever a time I failed? What do you guys think? No. Yes, many times. I can count them on like my hands and my toes, and I probably need a spreadsheet to do it. There were many times that I failed. I failed when I was in school and I was trying to do track. That didn't work out very well. I failed when I tried volleyball. I'm not a volleyball person. I figured out that horses were my thing. Again, figure out the things that you don't want to do by the things that you do want to do. I failed with careers.
Was there a specific time in which you failed that taught you a really big lesson?
Yes. Let me tell you one about, there was a job that I took coming out of Harvard Business School. I went to work for a company called Russell Reynolds. And Russell Reynolds, they do executive search, executive recruiting. And so they work, I'll come right to you. So then they work with CEOs and boards, and that's what they do, that placement. It was interesting. I was in love with the idea of that job, right? I'm flying around. I'm managing CEOs' careers. I have my own assistant. I have a huge office downtown Chicago. I kind of thought that I was the bomb. What I missed is that I didn't actually stop and understand what the job was. And so I started doing the job and I realized I hate this. I would have to spend, every time that I would meet a candidate, I would need to write a 4-page single-spaced letter talking about who that candidate was. Could I do it? Yes. Was I good at it? Yes. But did I enjoy it? I didn't. And it was interesting, because it wasn't right in my sweet spot, it also wasn't coming across authentic, right? Because it wasn't something that was good and easy for me. So I've got multiple examples like that. But I always learned out of those failures. I learned more from the failures than I do from the successes. And from those failures, I learned resilience. I learned grit, and I also learned that I have to be sure that I'm true to me. When I'm true to me, then I succeed, and I really shine. So that's one thing that always continues to come back and ground me. Yes? Best tactic for getting really good grades? Studying hard. So it's, It depends on the classes, right? So part of it is studying hard, part of it is taking risks, part of it's working with your teachers. Again, there were times that I didn't know what I was doing, but I would ask my teachers and I would say, I'm not understanding something, I'm not processing this, help me figure out how to do it. So I would get some time with the teacher after school if I needed to do that. But really, you have to put in the work. In college, I learned that really, really transparently. I had to be sure that I put in the hard work. When a lot of my friends were playing and they were having a lot of fun, I wasn't. But the good news is I actually was having fun with my engineering friends because we all had something in common. We were all still working on a Saturday night or a Friday night when other people were out playing. So I continued just to figure out what other people could help me through something if I was struggling. Great question. Yes, go ahead. What did I think I wanted to do when I was growing up? Did you ever watch musicals and chorus line? I wanted to be in the chorus line. So I was like, I really wanted to do something like that. But then when I started processing it, I was like, that's not going to pay for what I want to do. I went into engineering because I didn't know what I wanted to do. But I knew that I was good at math and science. And so it was interesting. Math and science came easier to me than English and history. And so I just kind of kept going down that path. The other thing that got very interesting is there was a pivotal moment where I was thinking, do I want to go own a scuba shop? Right? Do I want to be a horse trainer? And I also realized I like those things as my hobbies, not as my full-time job for me. Because I had a lot of hobbies, and I wanted to be sure that I continued driving and doing something in business. I actually had a lot of fun with some of the things that I was doing. So, great question. Go ahead.
Are you a structural engineer or a
Excellent question. I was an industrial engineer. An industrial engineer, so out of Purdue, and an industrial engineer, think about efficiency and how plants operate, and think about flows. And so how do you make sure that materials are continuing to go through the way that they should? Now, any kind of engineering, you actually have to take some of those other classes. I took electrical engineering classes. I took thermodynamics. I took a lot of the chemical engineering things. So you have to go through and you have to have a base level of most of the engineering aspects, and then you end up specializing in the other, like in the classes that end up becoming your major. Great question.
What do you mean by people playing?
What do I mean by what?
People playing?
People playing in college? Here's what I mean. I mean that we had a lot of homework. So the engineering class had a lot of homework, and it was pretty rigorous. There were other majors that didn't have the level of intensity of homework that the engineering did. And so they played more on campus, they had more social time, they just did other things. But what was interesting is my closest friends, I was in a sorority at Purdue, but my closest friends by far were my engineering friends because we kind of all went through the trenches together. I mean, there were times that I almost missed a holiday because I still hadn't finished coding a computer program. And it's like, and they were due every Saturday night at midnight. Well, every Saturday, all of my engineering friends and I were in there, and a lot of my sorority sisters were not. So they were actually having fun and, playing games outside or, going to do sports and things like that, and that wasn't what I was able to do. Again, I don't have a single regret for putting the time in that I did, because again, that got me where I am today. Great question. Other questions? Thank you. Great question. How did I differentiate my hobbies from what I wanted to do? I really started thinking, it's interesting because you'll hear a lot of people say, do the things that you love. If you would have asked me if I would have loved Salesforce, right? I love the company, and I love the work that I'm doing there. If I won the lottery tomorrow, I would spend more time doing my hobbies. So I really would. That's just me personally. And I also still get a big high by working with the people that I'm working with and accomplishing the things that we're doing. I was very fortunate at Salesforce. In the last 3 years, I was running a business called the Marketing Cloud. I was able to grow that business. It was $1 billion business. I grew it by $1 billion in 3 years. Most people don't get to touch $1 billion business. I got to grow one by $1 billion in 3 years. So that was a lot of fun. The way that I differentiated my hobbies is it something that I want to do all the time and permanently? Or is it something that if I did it, would it take some of the joy out for me? And that's what I realized for me, is I like my work to be my work, and I liked my hobbies to be my hobbies, because that kept all of the joy completely in my hobbies. Does that make sense? It's a weird way to think about it, but it's like if I was doing that all the time, I didn't know if I would enjoy it and if it would fill me up as much if I only got to do it occasionally. Yes, good question.
So after like engineering, how did you decide you wanted to go into business?
I didn't. So I'll tell you what happened. Again, remember those mentors, somebody reaching back and somebody reaching up? A gentleman called my sorority house, and he wanted to talk to a Delta Gamma engineer. His wife had been a Delta Gamma. And so there were 3 of us out of a house of 81 girls. There were 3 of us that were engineers. 2 were actually on assignment, and so they were not there. They were on co-op. So I talked to him on the phone. And so this is when I was a sophomore, and we talked, and then I went back and I interviewed when I was a junior. So I ended up getting an internship in engineering. And it was interesting, at the same time, he said, based on who you are, you'd have a much better fit in brand management. I was like, I don't even know what brand management is. And he's like, that's okay. I ended up getting that internship with brand management, and I told him, I was like, I'm going to take the engineering one. And he said, he goes, you don't know what you're doing. I will rescind your offer. You need to go take that job. And what I didn't know that he did, when I was going in, so I was a junior in college, but I was actually getting the same internship as a lot of MBAs. So there were 68 people who were getting the internships, and there were only 4 undergrads. And so I appreciate him helping drive me into that. I wouldn't have known, but he saw something in me that I didn't understand and that I didn't see in myself, and that's how I ended up getting into business. Now, he's exactly right. So it's like, so I love being able to spread and to dance into both worlds, because I spend a lot of time with engineers now. But again, engineers, I have instant credibility because of what my background is. Excellent question. Ellen. How did I handle my stress over homework? Excellent question. Some days I handled it very well. Other days I didn't. I found the things that brought me joy. I still do the same thing, right? It's like my job is very stressful. I work with the CEO of Salesforce a lot. I have to do his board decks. I do a lot of things. How do I manage it? I try and make sure to compartmentalize and say, okay, here is my schoolwork, and here's the things that I'm trying to do. I will do the best that I can. I always make sure that my father gave me a lesson, which was very important. He said, at the end of the day, you need to be sure that you can always look yourself in the mirror and be confident and happy with who you see. Did you do your best? Even if your best isn't an A, even if your best is not good enough for somebody else, did you give your best? And so that's how I started evaluating myself, as to, let's try and do the grades that I can. In college at Purdue, there was one time where I thought I was going to get a D. And my dad said, D for done. And it was in the thermodynamics class. It was a flunk out class. It was a testing class. And he said, just get through it. Just power through it. That was a big shock to my system, right? Coming out with a 4.6. That was a big shock to my system. But what I learned, again, is the perseverance. Once I went through college, nobody asked my GPA. Today, no one is saying, what is your GPA? Your GPA matters a lot when you're going from high school and into college. It also matters a little bit when you're coming out of college. But no one has asked me about my GPA in 20 years. But that's how I try to manage it. It's like, do the best that I can, right? And also, you have to know when enough is enough. There are times when you've got to say, I've given everything that I can, and this is what I'm going to continue to try and do. I'm going to leave you guys, I want to leave you with one picture. Describe her to me. Describe her. I know it's after lunch. Describe her. Who do you see? Do you see a dog on the screen? Do you see an elephant? What do you see? What do you see? Go ahead. A super child girl, yep. You see a super child girl. What's she doing? Pointing forward, pointing towards something. Do you think, is she confident? Yeah. Does she seem like she is powerful? Does she seem like she's in charge? Does she seem like the world is ahead of her? Remember this girl. There's a saying that I have on my desk, and I learned this early, and I say it to myself all the time. Your mindset is so important. She believed she could, so she did. What's that little girl say? She believed she could, so she did. So, you guys will go far in life. I would love to take you with me every time that I go to something. If I can help with anything, then please let me know. So thank you all, and have a great rest of the conference. So